All right, let's do this.
All right, hit me. Hit me. Let's go.
Why do certain personality types do better in life?
I think certain energies do better in certain positions. Personality types, I don't know how real they are. I think what happens is that people either don't develop themselves to put themselves in a position of being confident when they walk in a room. Most of the time when you are confident with yourself, you're going to tend to be more outgoing. And when you're more outgoing, you can strike up more conversations. When you can tune in and start listening to people and make conversations more about them, because you're more outgoing and you're confident in yourself and you don't feel the need to fire back about what makes you awesome, if you can keep it about them because you know who you are and you're comfortable with yourself, then I think it lends itself to more success in business because you're already confident and you're confident sitting inside the frame of whatever it is in their life that they have to tell you that's positive. And most people are only going to tell you positive things about them. If you're okay with that and you're confident in yourself because you've built yourself up to sit inside their greatness, then you're going to do really well in life. But I don't know if that's more about personalities or the work that you've done on yourself to feel like you deserve to be in that room.
Why is it important to be selective of who you hang around?
Because who you hang around is how you're going to get looked at by the world. And that's whether people love you or hate you. Where I'd rather have 2 million people that love me and 6 million people that hate me, because it's not about the people that hate you in this world. It's about the people that truly love you for who you are. And when you choose your friends, you're going to get associated to that love and that hate. Make sure the person that you choose to associate with is worth both the love and the hate. And I feel like I've done a great job of that in my life because I love the people that have given me that association. And I can only count that in the scorebook of my own life and my own heart. So the people I chose, I'm authentically choosing them because they align with me and who I am. And for that reason, I never regret it ever.
What mindset shift should a man adopt when going out into the world?
He should first accept that life is not fair. He should accept that it's going to take him a little bit longer than he thinks it is, so he better get to work immediately. He should ultimately accept that everything that happens to him is his fault, and if he refuses to accept that regardless of other people's actions, then he is going to be at the will of another man at all times. There's plenty of times in my life where I watched somebody that I made an agreement with, particularly employees, go outside of that agreement. If I were to give them the power of me believing that it wasn't on me and I was not the sole root of the problem, i.e. picking a different person, then I would be at the mercy of another man's actions. And that takes the ball out of my hands in the game that is my life. I want the ball in my life. I believe that if I pass the ball to somebody else and they don't take the shot or they miss the shot, then I should have passed it to somebody else or I should have took the fucking shot myself. But that gives me ultimate power in my life. It gives me the power of decision, power of choice, and it gives me hope that I can change and create the life that I want for myself, all solely on my back. And at the end of the day, you have to answer to the man in the mirror. And if you can't get yourself in a position to trust that person completely, then you're missing a competency, which is good news because you know exactly what to work on. It's always on you, always.
When should people start worrying about taxes?
I think a really great book to read would be Rich Dad Poor Dad. And the reason I like that book so much is because if you look at it from the perspective of understanding where you are in the food chain, you employ a solopreneur, you own a business or a corporation, whether you're the investor or the guy swinging the hammer. When it comes to taxes, you have to understand if you're the guy swinging the hammer, you're going to get maximum tax breaks anyway. Once you start to get in middle class is when you start paying the most in taxes. And when you can get to the point that you're making enough money that the taxes actually hit you, you're going to start to realize very quickly that you're going to have to find ways around that. I don't think there's a point where you can say, hey, it's time to study taxes. I think it's something that you should know about all the way along the ride. I think what's more important is understanding where you are in the food chain. There were times where I'd get really excited about the fact that I was going to make $50,000 or $100,000 on a project. But then once I did enough projects and made that money, I realized that the guy that was investing in the property that hired the company that hired me was actually the one making the big money. He was getting the depreciation on the building that I was building for the general contractor. I started to understand food chain. And what you have to understand about that particular situation, I'm building a building. I make $100,000 on the job. I'm going to have a certain amount of taxes that I'm going to pay. That gentleman might not pay taxes on that property when he depreciates it, and he gets cash flow, and he gets appreciation. So understanding where you are in the food chain and how all the different players pay taxes across that entire food chain will tell you what you need to know about taxes. Also having a good CPA and understanding how taxes work is going to be really important. But I don't think there's any point in the game where you shouldn't be studying financial literacy completely, including taxes. But what will put it in perspective for you is understanding where you are in the food chain of your particular situation, how you can get up it, and how the guy at the top of it is getting his tax breaks, because that's going to give you the information you need to know where you need to go and how you can get successful. Middle class pays most of the taxes. You can't forget that. So you need to find a way to get to the part of the food chain where you are not liable for those taxes in the way that the guy in the middle. Because the middle class is the people that are really getting squeezed. You have poor people that get government handouts, and you have rich people that figure out the game. Those people are the ones that are best off, that are working really, really hard. They get hit the hardest. And so there's no point when you shouldn't be studying taxes. But first, you need to know where you are in the pecking order of taxes as a whole and what you do.
What's the best way to handle debt when you've accumulated a lot of it?
Well, there's good debt and bad debt. I have millions of dollars of debt in my real estate portfolio, but that debt pays me. What you have to understand about debt, particularly debt that has interest, is you can write the interest off. And so it goes back to what is an asset and what's a liability. I don't mind having debt on an asset. For example, let's say I have well over 20 million in real estate in my portfolio. I owe quite a bit of money on that debt, but that debt pays me a profit. It's because of the debt that I can make the profit. Then I can write off the cost of the money, which is the interest, I guess, on my taxes. All the while, my net worth grows year after year after year after year as the property goes up in value and as the rents go up. But I bought it for the same price. So when it comes to debt, you need to understand that an asset is something that makes you money. A liability is something that costs you money. A great example of that would be my Lamborghini. That car is not an asset. That car is $6,000-$7,000 a month, I guess, by the time I pay my interest and everything on it. It does not pay me money. If I rented that car and I made $10,000 a month and the note was $7,000, then it would certainly be an asset. But until it gives me profit, it's a liability. So that's one thing that people don't understand is assets and liabilities. Debt is not a bad word. Is the debt profitable? That's what's important. Credit card debt, particularly when you first get started at high interest rates, is certainly a liability. And I honestly think it should be illegal to bill people massive amounts of debt because they're in a horrible financial position. I really do think it's a shark thing to do. You'll see a lot of payday loans places and they're 25-30% of the people never pay it off. And they'll chase them and chase them and chase them until they take everything they own. It's a shark type business. And so one thing I would tell a young man is to pay attention to the terms on the debt that you get. You buy a used car, cool. What is the interest rate? Find out, because it's going to be very important, because you might be paying 20-something% interest on a truck note that you think is $1,000 when only 300 of that is going to principal. And that, my friend, is not an asset. You're not making money off of that truck unless it's a dump truck or something in a business. So you need to understand the difference between an asset and a liability, and then look at the cost of the money on the asset that you're buying and make sure that it also makes sense in the equation of you owning the asset. And anything that you're paying an exorbitant amount of interest on, debt, and it's not an asset, is definitely a no. So you shouldn't be buying anything you can't afford. And if you are buying something that you can't afford cash, make sure it's an asset, not a liability. Women are also assets and liabilities, for the record. That's not my channel, though.
I heard it's super vital to understand accounting when building or starting or scaling a business. Is that true?
What's really true about accounting is you might not understand debits and credits in the beginning. You might not fully understand a balance sheet in the beginning. P&Ls are pretty straightforward. But what's really important about needing accounting, needing a solid set of books, is because as a business owner, you should be measuring everything and you should truly know your numbers. And that's not, I'm not saying anything groundbreaking here, but if you don't know your numbers, you don't know how to move the dial. So accounting is a way of tracking historically what happened, even if it's just last month. What were all the transactions in the business that led us to get to the point where you made this amount of money or didn't make this amount of money? And so if you can look back at that historical data of accounting, then you know what to do in the future to become more and more profitable as the months go by. So you don't have to be an accountant, although I do think that's a good thing to study. I think it's more about knowing your numbers so you can make really good decisions in your business. Having good numbers can make business quite simple sometimes, because when you have really good books and accounting and tracking of what the costs were, the decisions themselves are no-brainers if you have common sense. So having a clean set of books and an accounting, that is what allows you to make those easy decisions. But your books have to be right first. So you need someone that does understand accounting, and you need to be reading those reports and asking questions.
Is it important to save money in like your bank account and keep it there?
I know there's a lot of people that say, have a year's worth or 6 months worth. I'm cool with that. And maybe you can put it in a money market account, something that's liquid that you can get to. But I also believe that, cash is trash. You hear people say that all the time. I agree with that. And the reason I agree with it is because you want to put the money to work. Money is nothing more than human energy stored. So if you can put a bunch of people to work and you can bring a bunch of money into an account, then instead of putting those, You keep those people working, but now you have all this stored energy that you could put into something else like an asset that would allow you put that money to work. And you can trust money to work because it's just money. It doesn't have a wife, it doesn't have a kids, it doesn't get drunk. You can put it in the market, you can put it in a real estate deal, you can reinvest it in a business. You can do all these things to put money to work, and then you start to get to a point where you can leverage. I also like to take money and just hire the next superstar in my business. I look at hiring an individual and I say, okay, well, if they're going to cost me 100 grand a year, what is the net profit if they do a good job at the position I put them? So I take that money, that stored energy from something else that I did or someone else did that I leveraged, and maybe put it into an individual. That individual, if a good employee, is an asset just as much as buying a real estate property. So it's like the money I put into you guys to build this business. I made money, I pay you, you're an asset, we continue to grow. And so that pot of money gets bigger. And then I take that money and I reinvest it again and it starts to snowball. Or I take the money that we made online and I put it into a real estate property. Now those 308 people are getting up and going to work every day. Somebody else is having to manage them in their job, but I'm getting about 25% of their income without having to deal with them in whatever job that they have. So I don't personally like to sit on a whole bunch of cash because of inflation. I want to put my money into something that's going to grow up and with inflation. And that's why I like real estate so much. That's also why I like businesses. I think businesses are one of the most explosive investments you could possibly make. And then people. I don't know that there's a better investment than people, because people can be a part of a business that can blow up overnight and you're doing millions in revenue. So I don't particularly like to let money sit still. Another thing about money that sits in bank account, if money just sits in a bank account with no intention, you'll find that it slowly, gradually deplenishes because you'll just spend it on something. So there's also that to think about. Money needs to be managed.
Is getting a girlfriend in your 20s going to hold you back from achieving your full potential?
Not necessarily. It could be the thing that makes you grounded. You know, I think that your 20s are a very important time to study female nature. I don't think that you're going to develop as a man completely if you go get married early. I know there's people that disagree with that. I can see where some guys think if you get married, you think you have this certain mission, but I never needed a woman to have that discipline, and I didn't need the distraction. I had long-term girlfriends in my 20s, and I think those girlfriends were good for me at those times because it stopped me from going out and chasing a bunch of women. I had like a solid, go home, you got the sex, you got the food. It's kind of boring, but you need to be boring at certain periods of your life. So if you're going through this spot in your 20s where you're kind of in monk mode and you have a good relationship with a girl that's actually healthy, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I just not a big fan of getting married in your 20s because you don't know the man you're going to become yet. So as some guys are what they would call successful in their 20s, if they give too much of that attention and that life energy to a woman that they may or may not be with forever, then that man, even though he might do great things, maybe he could have done more. It's not that I have anything against the relationship itself. It's really just about reaching the full potential. And I think that's different for every person. So I also will go and say that I don't think chasing women and having multiple women in your 20s is a very good idea either. It's just about the energy consumption when you could be working on the man you're going to become. That's what's most important to me and was most important.
What do you think most young guys are lacking personality-wise?
Well, I think with every generation, there's a new set of obstacles and opportunities. So for young men today, I don't think they do as well in real life relationships because most of their interaction now is going to be online. And I think that's a disadvantage, but that also comes with the advantage of being able to do a lot bigger things and scale out and touch a lot more people because of the internet. So I think that any young man today should just make sure, do a personal check-in with himself to see if he has enough real life interaction in real business, real relationships, real people, just to ensure that he's not over digitized in the way that he communicates with them. And if he can check in with himself and make sure that he has strong personal relationships that are in person, then it doesn't have to be a negative thing.
Do you believe in the whole concept of extrovert, introvert, and that whole kind of
Not
paradigm?
particularly. I think that any person can work on himself enough to be able to have a decent conversation with anyone. I think the more confident you are in yourself, the more that you'll flourish. So again, if you're in the proper physical condition, if you have treated your body and your mind correctly and you dress a certain way, and you're confident in who you are, it'll allow you to walk into a room with a completely different ambiance about yourself. And I think that confidence comes off of you and it allows you to open up to conversations and be confident in those conversations. And I think that a lot of people that are introverted aren't completely comfortable with who they are. And I think for that reason, they call themselves introverted, but really they're just not completely comfortable with that interaction.